Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's deputy comment editor, Annabel Denham. Welcome to both of you.
Good to see you, Anna.
As ever, let's check out the front pages, shall we? Starting with the Metro, which leads with the meeting between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. Their headline, Mad, Vlad and Dangerous, calling them desperate despots. The Eye is reporting that a ban on energy firms force-fitting prepayment meters leaves children under 5 at risk. The Guardian says that the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak blocked plans to rebuild 5 hospitals riddled with crumbling concrete. Labour ready to open the door to EU asylum seekers. That's the headline in the Daily Mail. They say Keir Starmer will launch his party's immigration plan tomorrow. Same for the Telegraph. They report that Labour's plan to share the burden of asylum seekers to fix the small boats crisis. Out of control reads the Mirror. It's the next front page in their series on the rise in shoplifting. While the FT has news of an EU investigation into trade practices in the Chinese electric vehicle sector. And the headline for the Daily Star, that UET, as the fossilised bodies of 2,000-year-old non-humans have been unveiled in Mexico. There's still a lot left beyond non-humans. Anyway, don't forget, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. All sorts of animals, bar aliens. Anyway, let us talk more. Kevin and Annabel are here. And Annabel, you kick off then with the Metro. Mad, Vlad and Dangerous, desperate despots face to face. That is an extraordinary meeting in southeast Russia, just over this tiny border that North Korea has with Russia.
Yes, and the Metro haven't held back in their reporting of this, and it would be vaguely amusing were it not so alarmingly serious. I think what we're seeing here is a consolidation, really, of the axis of evil. I think, there are concerns that there will be some kind of arms deal that might emerge from this. There's the takeaway that, this relationship really demonstrates that there's no length, no allegiance that Vladimir Putin won't try and form in order to prolong and seek victory in that war in Ukraine. But, I do wonder whether the Russian president is going to come to regret this. North Korea is one of the most unstable dictatorships in the world. So, there's also the question about, how China is going to respond to this. Is there going to be frustration in Beijing that North Korea is not behaving obediently towards it? How, if at all, will they respond? And, of course, a lengthening of the conflict in Ukraine makes it awfully uncomfortable for Xi Jinping, who I expect wants this to be over as quickly as possible, China not having come out and actually set out exactly what its position is.
Yes, there's all sorts of UN sanctions against what North Korea can export, and then questions about if munitions were involved, would they be compatible with Russian weapons? What kind of state are they in? Described as museum-ready by some analysts.
No, absolutely. And Russia, we believe, has been complying with the UN sanctions on the nuclear program in North Korea. Doesn't mean it's going to... Putin's now prepared to break them because, of course, the North Koreans will want nuclear satellite missile technology, and in turn, it seems Putin wants shells for his artillery. And send some food the other way too, but look, they're both desperate. I like the way the Metro say 2 of the world's worst tyrants. If we're going to play top trumps, tyrant top trumps, who else is there? I suppose there's a loyal ally, Saudi Arabia, maybe Iran. Belarus, but it's a sign they're both desperate. You've got an isolated leader now in Putin, and you've got the leader of an incredibly isolated country, because that's the way it wanted to go in North Korea.
Well, and separate for Kim Jong-un and his missile, ambitions and his nuclear ambitions is, they need money, they need food, because the population often faces starvation, and they need fuel as well, which is some of the stuff that actually Russia can supply. Yeah, it can.
It's still producing food, got plenty of fuel, including that which we don't buy anymore in Europe. So, yeah, you can see the grounds for a deal. But it's going to be a very dodgy deal. It's hardly the way forward. Yeah. And also, I can't imagine the Chinese who do have a lot of contacts with the North Koreans and...
Well, they bankroll them, don't they?
Yeah, nominal allies with Russia, but we don't believe they've been supplying arms during this conflict. I don't think they will like their neighbour, which they will realise is as mad as a box of frogs, isn't he, Kim Jong-un?
And if munitions are supplied, an enormously long supply line, unless China allows them through their territory, which raises real questions, certainly, with relations with China once again, which we've had a lot about this week. Let's move on, shall we? Right, the big reveal. What is Starmer going to do about immigration and the small boats crisis? We'll find out. Here's the story in the Telegraph, Annabel.
Yes, he's going to smash the criminal gangs responsible for smuggling migrants across the Channel. Now, this is Sir Keir finally, possibly setting out properly what Labour's response is to the migrant crisis. Of course, we had Rishi Sunak coming out at the start of the year and pledging to stop the boats. He didn't specify how many boats he was intending to stop. Perhaps if he stops the handful, he'll declare it some kind of victory. But, it looks as though Keir Starmer is going to make some kind of deal with the EU that could allow the UK to return some migrants who are deemed to have no claim here. But, of course, there's concerns about this reciprocal arrangement perhaps leading to something that looks a little bit like open borders, freer movement of migrants between the UK and the EU, and perhaps a closer relationship between the UK and the EU. Now, Rishi, of course, has done a lot to repair, I think, what Boris and Liz Truss damaged, but nonetheless, arguably there's work to do. However, the Labour leader has not really wanted to talk about Brexit because he's trying to retain or to try and attract the support of, and to not alienate Red Wall voters who predominantly did vote to leave back in the 2016 referendum. So it's been immigration and Brexit are two awkward issues for the Labour Party, but they're also ones they cannot avoid.
Yeah, he tries not to mention the B word, Brexit. Other than Labour's...
Not Boris, then?
Yeah, no, who? He's gone now. He's history. Oh. But the Labour line is make Brexit work now, accept it, make it work. Now, of course, how do you make it work it's going to be rather...
Without giving up the gains that the Brexiteers might say you've made.
Yeah, whatever they are, if they exist at all. But we will. I know, it's always winds are up. But we'll find out tomorrow the fuller extent of Labour's policy on stopping the boats. They had a 5-point plan, which in truth didn't amount to very much, but going to Europol saying, right, treat the people smugglers as terrorists. Europol may not agree, but it's kind of it's good PR from Starmer. But then how do you do it? What do you do the deal? And if you're going to take some people from the European Union, they're refugees. Now, the Mail of using the figure of 120,000 from the government, I just don't think that will be accurate. It's good propaganda, but net migration now is 600,000 plus at a record, much higher than during European Union membership. We've got 40,000 people coming from the boats, but most of them, when they are processed, are found to have legitimate claims to be here. And I think probably where Starmer is going is if you want a return programme with the European Union for those who aren't deemed entitled to stay here, you're probably going to have to accept those who are deemed to be here. And you would have to process them over on the other side, which you could do. You could open a processing centre in France. People could apply, seeking asylum and saying they're refugees, and you could judge it over there instead of letting them get in boats, come across, and then dealing with them afterwards. And if they aren't then entitled to stay here, then you have the issue of how do you remove them? Well,
the details seem to be of this Labour plan, deepening intelligence ties with Europe as part of a new post-Brexit security pact, strengthening powers to restrict the movement of those suspected of organised immigration crime. And as part of its plans, Labour says it would work to reach a new agreement to share real-time intelligence with the EU, similar to the Schengen Information System 2, a database of terror suspects and immigration offenders, which the UK had automatic access to before Brexit. But he's also on manoeuvres. Sir Keir is seeking, it says here, to emphasise his credentials as former Director of Public Prosecutions during a visit to The Hague with Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper this week, and PA is reporting that he's off to France.
He's going to meet Macron
To
next
meet
week.
Macron. Yeah, exactly. The president, an aide to Mr. Macron, telling Politico, in fact, the president told Rishi Sunak on the sidelines of the G20 that he was going to meet Keir Starmer. It's logical for the president to meet the different players of European countries. You know, it feels like, you know, on manoeuvres ahead of an election.
If you're Macron in France or the leader of any European country, you will realise there is a reasonably high possibility of political change in the UK at the end of next year with a new Prime Minister. So you might as well get to know him now. Sunak won't like that, but I think it's kind of just makes sense.
Well, it also says he's eyeing a visit to Joe Biden as well. He's already met the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, you know, then Irish Premier Michael Martin. So, you know, he's
getting ready.
He's getting, well, you said it,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Let's move on, shall we? The Guardian, with their exclusive by Pippa Creer, their political editor. Sunak blocked a rebuild of hospitals riddled with this crumbling concrete. Annabel.
Yes, so just 2 of the 7 hospital rebuilding projects that were requested by the Department of Health were signed off by the Treasury back in the 2020 spending review. Now, you know, there's been a lot of efforts by the left to try and connect Rishi Sunak personally to the concrete crisis, and they've been reasonably successful with it. This latest story is, of course, just going to bring the row over RAC back to the fore after a pretty terrible week for the Conservative Party. They wanted to come back. They tried to set the agenda over the summer. They wanted to try and keep that momentum. And, of course, it's gone pretty terribly for them. Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, is really just seems to be clinging onto her job by her fingernails. But, of course, you know, aside from the politics, is the more serious issue of how we are going to address this problem, how we're going to ensure that, you know, all of the sites with crumbling concrete are identified, potentially evacuated and fixed.
I suspect Labour won't pledge to immediately rebuild these 5 hospitals any more than it said where the money would come from to replace the crumbling concrete schools, which it made great play of. But it's where Sunak's history as Chancellor is coming back to haunt him now. He is Prime Minister as a crisis, because we saw he cancelled school projects. Department of Education came up with a whole load. He knocked a lot back, and it's the same here. Department of Health wanted 7 rebuilt. They only got 2 rebuilt. So he can't escape it. What Labour do down the line is another issue. But it's chickens coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? You can unpick a lot of Chancellor decisions.
Yeah.
It's part of, you know. And just very quickly, if you don't mind, the Eye, which has done a lot of work about prepayment meters, now suggesting that banning the forced fitting of them actually might leave young children at risk, Kevin.
Yeah, the Times, though, did the main breakthrough story.
By the Eye.
Yeah,
they had video, didn't they?
When they went undercover and showed the sort of laughing about breaking into houses to put in, the contractors. Anyway, now breaking in effectively to force fit a prepayment meter will be banned if there's kids under 2, but not under 5. And so there's this question: why 2, not 5? Mind if it was 5, then you'd say why not 7 or 11 or 16, whatever it is. Of course, 2. If they're 2, they are babes in arms. I can kind of see that, and very different to toddlers, if you like. But it still feels, I think, to me, a bit harsh that families with very young kids, which they will be under 5, could have a prepayment meter fitted, which of course they can't afford to feed, and then that means they haven't got any hot water or able to cook and possibly even light.
But equally, is there not a risk here that those who don't have prepayment meters, because perhaps they haven't met their bills in the past, because they haven't been able to afford to, simply won't be served by these companies? If they have no guarantee that they're going to get payment, is there a risk that these people are going to be cut off? And, of course, the wider issue is just how the government is going to ensure there is targeted support to those who need it most as we go into this winter.
Yeah, it's the real issue is how people on benefits and people on very low incomes, how can they meet very high? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there will be a few people somewhere who will play the system and say we're just not going to pay, but there'll be others who just cannot pay. They just can't afford to pay. Do we really want to cut them off now? At one time, you would have been cut off, but what happens now is you put in a prepayment meter, so you haven't cut them off, but they can't use that meter because they haven't got the cash to get the credit. And it's a really sly way of leaving people freezing in the dark.